Alright guys, so now that we're in between FNCS Week 1 and FNCS Week 2, I want to go over everything I learned from watching all 4 rounds of FNCS Week 1. This is going to be stuff that's going to be happening in the early, mid, and the late game. I'm going to be explaining all of this stuff to you, and be sure to stick around to the end of the video so that you guys don't miss any important information. Let's get right into it. So guys, the first main thing is definitely going to be efficiency in the early game. Now this can mean a lot of different things. For me and for a lot of really good players in this past week of FNCS, this meant having a really good loot path. What this means is that where you drop, where you rotate after to get loot, the differences of that between you and your duo, how you guys don't have to cross paths, how you play when you're contested and uncontested, that's all going to involve your loot path. So let's say that when you're uncontested, you guys land on opposite sides of your drop spot / POI, and then you guys do a zigzag pattern, sort of rotate it and loot it without intersecting with one another in order to save time. But if you're contested, what you guys can do is you can easily land on each other at a place with a bunch of loot and then rotate onto the enemies that landed on you and then eliminate them easily. This is the main thing of having a loot path. Whether you're uncontested or contested, there needs to be 2 different loot paths that you guys have for each one, and you need to make sure you lock those in for this week. The next thing is going to be farming metal early. That's a really big aspect. Metal, like I've always said, is one of the most important hard materials in the game right now. It's very crucial for the end game. So I think that in general, if you guys have to get metal, you should do it earlier rather than later, simply because it's harder to get later because more people have farmed it and it's more scarce around the map. Another really big part of this that's also able to get you metal is farming stuff like slurp barrels, having a place that you can go to get your shield like cacti. What I'd recommend you guys basically do is use as much natural shield as possible in order to save your actual shield for the later stages of the game. That's a crucial aspect of making sure you budget your resources and have a good amount of meds later in the game as well. And then the last thing about the early game efficiency is going to be having a good surge route and getting early storm surge off spawn. This can mean that when you guys land, you're able to actually tag some people in the air very easily. That's going to give you quick surge right off the bat. Or if you guys land and you have a really long range weapon, you can shoot people in other drop spots as well. Basically, having a good surge plan and doing it early, that's the main thing of being efficient in the early game. The next thing that I saw was people getting higher level loot. A lot of the teams that won these games in these rounds, they had really quality loot throughout pretty much all of their mid and end games. And the way that they were able to get this was one of 2 ways. Either they had a bunker, which is a really good way to get loot. If you guys want to get bunkers, what I'd recommend is you just genuinely open a bunker with you and your duo. One person in the duo goes down into the bunker and loots it, while the other person stays up top and protects the team from any third parties that may try to come up on the bunker as well. That's a really good way to loot really quickly and get tons of good loot, and then you guys can switch if you want to see who needs what loot. But that's the first way that I'd recommend you guys get really high tier loot. The second way is to land at a high loot density POI. This could be a named POI or an unnamed POI with a bunch of chests in a small proximity. Open all of these things, get all the ammo boxes, all of the chests, all of the loot in the floor, and then make sure you guys are able to maximize the profit of what weapons you have. So try to get the best weapons, pick out which ones work best for you, and make sure you leave this high density loot POI with a good amount of weapons and a good amount of ammo, shields, and mats. That's how you're really going to succeed. Having good loot, being equipped for this in tough endgame that's coming up after, that's the best thing to do in the early / starting stages of the mid game to actually improve and pop off in FNCS. Now leading into the more mid-game side of it, now I'd recommend you guys genuinely try to have a good mid-game rotation. Something you need to understand is that this season has a very messy meta in which there's a lot of lobby focusing, there's a lot of incorrect rotates that can really mess you up very easily. Basically, what I'd recommend for you guys is that you try to rotate on the dead side of the zone during the mid game, preferably later once the zone actually pops up rather than trying to predict where the zone's going to pop up. What I mean by this is when the zone actually appears on the map, that's when you rotate. It's not too late, but it's not too early. It's right in that sweet spot where nobody's really going to be focusing you too much if you guys try to rotate dead side. In general, I recommend don't try to pre-rotate the zone during the mid game, but rather just rotate as the storm circle appears on the map. This will create space for you guys. It'll make other people very tempted to rotate, and then you can lobby focus them as well if they don't know when the right time is to rotate. Like I said though, the right time to rotate is going to be right when that mid-game storm circle appears on the map. As soon as it's there, I'd recommend you and your team try to rotate on the dead side. As you guys know, the dead side is the part of zone with the lesser amount of players on it, but in general, that's what I'd recommend you do for your mid-game. That is crucial. Now the next tip is going to be more of an end game rotation tip. This has to do with you guys pushing your endgame storm circle rotations as late as possible. The reason for this is because now the longer you wait to rotate, the less people will be focusing on you because they will be more focused on their own positions and their own rotations as the zone starts moving. So the later in the zone, the more likely you are to have a safer and more efficient rotate. My recommendation though is to not overcomplicate this at all. A lot of the pro player teams are trying to stay on the same layer for pretty much all of endgame, or if they switch, they try to switch not very frequently simply because it's very ideal to have one layer for a long period of time because it's way easier to rotate on one layer than it is to rotate up and down, which is way harder. Like I said, rotate later in these endgame circles. I think that's a crucial aspect of the endgame. Be sure to do that because this applies to almost every single scenario in these endgame zones. This is a crucial aspect. Be sure to study this tactic. And of course, guys, something that a lot of the pro players are doing to perform in these FNCS weeks is that they're abusing the effects of the Nitro Splash. That is a crucial way to rotate that many people are doing throughout the endgame. Nitro Splashes increase your speed, jump distance, and decrease your stamina loss rate. They also use it for a bunch of refreshes. They barge into people's boxes. They're able to really get a speed boost and eliminate players. And this is crucial for the endgame because it gives you a refresh on materials, health, anything else you may need, ammo. It's a really good way to get refreshes, to use a Nitro Splash, barge into somebody's box, and just get that elimination as quick as possible. That's a way that a lot of pro players are actually rotating and efficiently getting a really good endgame elimination if they need it. And of course, this creates a really good tool for both offensive and defensive strategies during the endgame. And that's why I'd recommend you definitely have to use the Nitro Splash regardless of where you are and what position you are in these games. And then guys, in my opinion, the final best thing that a lot of these pro players are doing very well for this FNCS is playing Medkit. A lot of people are using Medkits to stay back in the zone, med up, and tank some storm damage in order to get a really good position in this endgame. This will allow them to get some placement points. It'll allow them to maybe rethink their rotation. It's a really good way to just generally stay alive and rethink what you're doing in this endgame. Like I said, this can also assist you in mapping out a better rotation throughout the zones and potentially getting a better position if you pull the zone. So for example, let's say you fall back into the zone and the zone's rotating far away from you. Then you stop, you medkit, and the zone eventually pulls back to you. You don't really have to move. You just have to use your medkit and tank zone until the zone comes back on you, and then you're no longer taking storm damage. That's a really good strategy and a really good way to bank on the genuine RNG of these zones. It's a way that a lot of players are using, and I think it's crucial for a lot of you out there. Pretty much though, medkits are the best white health item to carry by far in the meta right now. They're just genuinely able to propel you to the highest level of having your white health situated. You guys are able to make endgame plays with them. You can heal off with them at the end of the game if too many players are alive at the end. But that's genuinely how I'd recommend you use them because that is a crucial aspect of you guys actually playing in these endgames. But anyways, guys, that is the video on everything I learned from FNCS Week 1. I hope you guys enjoyed. I really enjoyed watching this week, and I'm so excited to see how FNCS Week 2 will go. But that's about it for this video, guys. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye, guys.